Hugh Rowland was the epitome of reality TV. Real, unabashed, brave, and gritty. He was the Arctic bear on ice road trucks, speeding across icy highways as if it were another workday. Beneath all of that bluster, however, was a man who had fought against the cold, loneliness, and ever-present danger of catastrophe all of his life. He was the show, not just a character. Fans were therefore left wondering what happened when he abruptly disappeared. Why would a man who lived on risk simply leave? In actuality, Hugh's narrative took a dark turn, revealing a side of him that the cameras never captured, as well as suffering and loss. We must travel back in time and discover where it all started in order to comprehend it. Known to his followers as the polar bear, Hugh Rowland established himself as one of the world's most resilient truck drivers. He probably braved some of the worst roads in the world if you have seen an episode of Ice Road Truckers on the History Channel. Remote routes, blizzards, and frozen lakes may be found in North America's northern wilderness. However, Hugh's narrative began in Kelowna, British Columbia, long before he rose to fame on reality television. Having been born in 1957, he was accustomed to working hard. He was already operating cars on his family's farm by the age of 6. He was becoming accustomed to operating big machinery, when other children were still learning how to ride a bike. Early practical experience like that set the groundwork for a lifetime of operating large rigs and risky jobs. Grit molded his early years. Cold winters, hard hours, and learning to persevere in the face of adversity were all part of life in rural British Columbia. He developed a work ethic there that he carried with him. He thus seized the chance to transport supplies to far-flung gold and diamond mines via frozen highways. When someone asked him whether he wanted to bring anything up north, he was just a teenager. At that age, the remuneration was better than anything he had ever seen, and he said yes without blinking. At the age of 15, Hugh Rowland had no thoughts of celebrity or television cameras. He was only a teenager in the Northwest Territories, holding the wheel of a large truck and transporting cargo over some of Canada's most hazardous highways, ice roads, specifically, slick, frozen routes that might suddenly splinter at any time, the type of roads that didn't give a damn about your age. Rowland, however, was tough. He wasn't going to back down because the weather was crazy or the task was difficult. Simply put, his passion for trucking was what kept him going. In the year 2007, Rowland's hard work was going to take him to a place he never would have imagined on TV screens all throughout the nation. That year, the creators of the History Channel's reality show Ice Road Truckers were searching for drivers with real-life tales, real-world experience, and steely nerves. Rowland met all the requirements, but he didn't believe a word when they initially phoned him. He assumed it was a friend playing pranks on him. Ultimately, how frequently would a television network want to track a truck driver into the Arctic? Rowland did not provide a warm reception when they informed him that they intended to install cameras in his vehicles and record him as he drove up to Yellowknife. He just informed them that the roads would be closed for the season and that they may try again the following year if they were sincere, which they did. Those producers arrived at his front door a year later, eager to get going. Then it dawned on him. It wasn't a joke. This actually happened. You would assume that someone would be thrilled to be on a popular show, but Rowland never sought attention. His attention was on his work. He had debts to pay and burdens to carry, cameras or not. He stated right away that he didn't want the film team to impede his progress, slow him down, or interfere with his finances. From his perspective, there would be no one interested in watching trucks drive over ice roadways. He saw little value in seeing drivers brave the bitter weather on lonely, slippery roadways. He was soon disproved by viewers, who were captivated by the unvarnished blend of grimness, peril, and unadulterated survival once the cameras began to film. Hugh discussed how individuals were unaware of the seriousness of the work. Even with its outrageous appearance, the play failed to convey the entire impact of what it meant to put your life in danger. When others referred to them as cowboys, he would shake his head because, in his opinion, respecting the ice was more important than seeking thrills. Someone won't return home if you make one mistake. The first season premiered on Channel 5 in the United Kingdom in the early months of 2008. Around the same time, it was shown on Foxtel and Austar in Australia, and in June of that year, Network 10 joined. The Netherlands had it on RTL 7 by fall. In January 2010, Italy, a little later, aired it on the History Channel under the title Gli Eroi del Ghiaccio, or Heroes of the Ice. The statistics were crazy. As soon as it aired, it was the History Channel's largest original success in more than 10 years, drawing in 3,400,000 viewers. It was also widely criticized. It was referred to as gripping by others. The depth of the presentation took some by surprise. How these drivers persevere with just a steering wheel and a steel nerve, despite frequently being worn out and icy to the core. Hugh laughed at how the show depicted them as daring adventurers while in reality, their work was life or death. He recognized the appeal. What kept people returning was the suspenseful edge-of-your-seat experience. People were hooked on the danger, he said. What set the program apart was its continuous teetering on the brink of catastrophe and survival. For years, he had been driving on ice. It wasn't the salary that kept him coming back season after season, but it was a bonus. Something in his blood. Something deeper. But the work has its costs. Extreme cold, long distances from home, and the constant worry that every journey may be the last. However, he was prepared when the season returned. He eagerly anticipated the journey each time he set out, and he already missed it every time he returned home. Regarding the cameras, Hugh created his own code that set restrictions on how much of his environment they could view. He felt conflicted about it all in retrospect. He never wanted attention, but he didn't mind being recognized. He wanted to blend in with the crowd if anything. He claimed to be a private person all the time. He would sign an autograph or grin for a picture if someone asked, but it never felt very natural. He would hesitate for a while each time someone handed him a pen, wondering, what the hell am I supposed to write? But for Hugh, the grind continued even after the cameras stopped rolling. The need for supplies increased as gold and diamond mines appeared in the isolated northern tundra. Consequently, there is a demand for bold drivers like Hugh. Without a doubt, the task was dangerous, but it was hard to refuse the large salary. Eventually, Hugh was more than simply a driver. He was spending money on the actual rigs. He was already established in the business by the time Ice Road Truckers made its television debut. Rowland was more than simply a driver by that point. Known for his guts and determination, he was already a heavyweight in that cold environment, and it was easy to understand why men kept enlisting when they saw that these truckers might make a full year's pay in a few grueling months. According to reports, some of the seasoned veterans were earning over $100,000 annually. Alluring. Correct? However, there was a catch to that money. Each run was a risk. The unsettling sound of ice crackling beneath a fully laden rig was even mentioned by Hugh himself. It was frightening as well as unnerving. After hearing that roar, several beginners would never survive their first haul. Nevertheless, Rowland had a unique charisma that made him stand out. He immediately gained popularity as a fan favorite on Ice Road Truckers because of his dominant demeanor as well as his driving prowess. He went by the catchy moniker, the Polar Bear. It's interesting to note that one of his truck's insect deflectors inspired the name, but when viewers learned more about him, the nickname seemed more appropriate. Hugh was big, tough, and had an unadulterated fire about him. He even said that he was the type of man who, if provoked, wouldn't back down from a fistfight. The moniker Polar Bear ultimately defined him rather than merely sticking with him. Few occupations can compare to the level of workplace hazard that Ice Road Truckers encounter each and every winter. Imagine enormous 18-wheelers transporting tens of thousands of pounds of freight across frozen lakes in the Canadian wilderness, while the temperature drops below -60. It goes beyond a job. There is always a tightrope walk between danger and income, the excitement. Every mile of that cold highway is infused with it. The aspect that spectators can't take their eyes off of is the risk, though. Hugh Rowland, a seasoned Ice Road veteran, is at the center of this high-stakes environment. Rowland exposes the harsh reality in his book On Thin Ice, drawing on his lifetime of experience and more tales than most people could stand to hear. He starts off by stating a depressing truth. No one has ever been saved whose truck has passed through the ice. The tone is set by this sobering reality. However, it becomes even more gloomy. The harsh terrain has claimed the lives of 35 of Rowland's friends and relatives. Such figures not only draw attention to the danger, but they also reinterpret what danger actually means. Rowland, however, has a great deal of respect for the ice roads he has traversed for decades, and is not only come to shock. He asserts that the majority of catastrophes occur as a result of someone driving too quickly, or failing to pay attention. In order to listen to the sound of the ice, he constantly keeps his window down, even in extremely cold weather. For him, the road talking is that shifting and cracking, and the ice might swallow you whole if you don't listen. He told one site that he had almost frozen every part of his body over the years, including his fingers, cheekbones, and even spending 3 days buried in snow in his vehicle. Being hardy isn't enough to survive at temperatures as low as 60 degrees below zero. It has to do with your regard for the cold. In just a few minutes, hypothermia may develop. Frostbite and organ failure are not hypothetical risks. They always appear in the equation. The art of survival is also a science. According to Rowland, it all comes down to mobility since the ice can only bear so much weight. A truck may be permitted to transport 100,000 pounds while in motion, but once it stops, that amount of weight decreases to 60,000. Why? A truck stops and begins to push down straight, with no way for the ice below to redistribute the pressure. It's like punching a hole in the floor if you stop for too long, and once a rig goes under, it's gone. Novice drivers frequently have to learn the hard way. Some people stop in terror when they hear the ice cracking beneath their wheels. Reluctance is a one-way ticket to disaster, according to Rowland, thus they must be dragged off the lake and sent back. His counsel: continue to move, always. You're gambling with everything the moment you quit. Rowland didn't agree with the show's strong emphasis on intense competitiveness. It wasn't a big driver-on-driver confrontation for him. It was just work. Carrying as many cargo as possible before the roads closed for the season was the main goal of this exhausting round-the-clock task. Those who watch reality TV probably won't be surprised by this. A large portion of the content is edited for drama, with the goal of increasing tension and fostering a more competitive environment. Rowland maintained that most drivers weren't concerned with the show's obvious victors and losers. They had a simple objective: finish the task, not pursue fictitious awards or glory. To be honest, it could be fortunate that they weren't competing with one another. These drivers were already dealing with navigating enormous trucks through whiteout conditions and over frozen lakes. It may have become worse if there had been a genuine rivalry added to the mix. Speaking of dynamics and drama, you may have noted that the crew was primarily male if you watched the first few seasons. It wasn't until season 3 that Lisa Kelly appeared. Regarding it, Rowland had a theory. He reasoned that the producers may have hired her in part to provide some excitement and perhaps attract some additional viewers. Furthermore, although Rowland occasionally spoke as though Lisa was still getting used to things, the reality was rather different. Before Lisa ever stepped onto the screen, she had been hauling for Carlisle Transportation for years. By then she had been trucking for 7 years, as she even stated on David Letterman. Rowland credited her in interviews with drawing attention to the event. According to him, the filmmakers believed she would make a decent tiny truck driver after training her on camera and demonstrating how she tackled the large hallways. However, his tone occasionally gave the impression that he believed her primary function was to attract spectators rather than to be a competent truck driver. However, Lisa eventually disproved this theory by traveling the same ruthless routes as the others, and even featured in the Deadliest Road spin-off, which took on perilous routes in South America and India. She dispelled any misgivings that could have been. Rowland faced difficulties during his time on the show. He talked openly about some of the more difficult times, especially when it came to leading his group. Joshua Nanny, a YouTuber, interviewed Rowland about how filming started to affect his company. He had faith in his staff before the cameras started rolling. However, once they were in the spotlight, things changed. After concentrating on their task, his drivers started to want for recognition and attention. Rowland ultimately had to make the painful choice to fire each and every one of them. The show kept concentrating on those former drivers even after they left, while Rowland discreetly brought in new hires and went back to work. He claimed that as time went on, the cameras became less noticeable. He hardly noticed them, focusing instead on the task at hand, unless they were shooting anything important. For 8 seasons, Rowland remained a major character on the program, becoming a mainstay and even making an appearance in a few spin-offs. But he suddenly stopped appearing in the series in 2014. It has nothing to do with early retirement or creative disagreements. A severe vehicle accident that completely upended his life was what finally drew him off the ice. Rowland wasn't even operating a motor vehicle when the collision occurred. Will Morrison, one of the show's producers, was driving, and he was riding shotgun. On a Canadian route, Morrison lost control and collided with a group of trees, according to court records. In the end, Rowland sued him, alleging that Morrison had been driving carelessly. However, Rowland suffered serious injuries to his lower body as a result of the accident, not just a few bruises. According to him, such injuries were so bad that they prevented him from driving trucks professionally, effectively ending a lifelong career. However, the claim went beyond injuries that ended a career. Rowland also disclosed that his personal life, particularly his marriage, had suffered as a result of the disaster. He said that the physical and psychological effects of the injuries had caused major issues at home, and that they had impacted his relationship with his wife. Rowland blamed the incident for ruining one of the most intimate aspects of his life, in addition to his job, according to TMZ, which picked up the story. Regarding Rowland's current feelings about ice road truckers, it's interesting to learn that while playing the lead, he never actually watched the show. Rowland acknowledged in a previous YouTube interview that he had only watched around 3 episodes, all of which were from promotional events when the program was first starting off. However, he was frequently questioned about moments from the program by his devoted friends and family. However, Rowland claimed that he didn't particularly enjoy seeing himself on TV, and that he didn't feel the need to relive it on film because he was already experiencing it. Rowland has changed his emphasis and distanced himself from the spotlight since departing the program. He has been devoting more of his time to his family and his construction company, and he has managed to come out on top financially in spite of all that has happened to him. He is apparently the richest cast member in Ice Road Truckers history, with an estimated net worth of $2 million at the age of 64. Even if the road has changed, Rowland is still directing his own path.